got the lucky shirt going. So let's get to the rest of the week 2 slate here, and let's get to another SEC opener. We just obviously talked about the Florida-Kentucky game in the Swamp. Very intriguing matchup there. Let's go ahead and talk about the other big SEC opener, as I just mentioned. South Carolina going to Arkansas in Fayetteville Saturday, noon Eastern time, ESPN, Betfred. Interesting kind of line movement in the Betfred Sportsbook. Arkansas was an 8.5-point favorite. It is now down to 8. The over-under set at 53.5. And what's interesting about this game is I think if you watched Arkansas against Cincinnati, I think there's a lot of people that would probably say the line movement towards South Carolina makes a lot of sense. Arkansas was by no means bad, and you never want to forget where this program was 2 or 3 years ago. It shows how far that they've come, that you have a 7-point home win against a ranked team, and you feel like you left a little bit on the field. But I think that's how most Arkansas fans feel. I think that's how most people that watch that game feel. Overall, Cincinnati hardly played their best game, if you think about it. Had 2 missed field goals, 2 turnovers. This is kind of a crazy stat, right? First half, 4 trips into Arkansas territory that resulted in 0 points, which is pretty hard to do. 1 turnover, and 2 field goals. And so there was a scenario where Arkansas could have been in a much tighter spot. To their credit, though, they made the plays needed to win. And I think when I look at that Arkansas game, the thing that stands out is they were who they are. The old Dennis Green, they are who we thought they were. Well, that's who Arkansas was last Saturday against Cincinnati. Listen, it wasn't pretty. It wasn't great. But you go back and look at the final stats, it came out pretty impressive, right? Like, I talked about this on the Aaron Torres pod. Like, go to the Ohio State-Notre Dame game. For all the frustration from Ohio State fans, CJ Stroud ended up finishing almost 7 yards per completion without his best wide receiver. And I think it's a lot of the same with Arkansas. Yeah, you wanted it to be a little bit better, but you still finished KJ Jefferson. How about this? 18-26, 223 yards passing, 3 touchdowns. And then, oh, by the way, had another rushing touchdown. So on a day where you felt like you left a little bit on the field, you still get the win. Your star quarterback, 4 total touchdowns, 223 yards passing. And this is important as well. 224 yards rushing overall for Arkansas, 5 yards per carry. One of the best rushing teams in college football last year appears to be able to run the ball right at you, just like they did in 2021. Now, for South Carolina, it's a little bit of a different deal. And what's interesting about the South Carolina game is, to me, again, the Dennis Green. They are who I thought they were. Now, there was a lot of hype on South Carolina coming into the year, but I'll be honest, if you listen to this show, I explained I didn't really get where the hype was coming from. You go back and listen to my preseason SEC East preview, here's what I said, is that, look, it's not to disrespect Shane Beamer. Obviously, year one, picking up a mess that Will Muschamp left behind, and I think it's going to take a while to rebuild from that disaster, Will Muschamp related, not Shane Beamer related. But you go back to last year, and it's kind of what I just said with Kentucky. Was South Carolina that improved late in the year, or did they just play the right teams at the right time? Remember, they got bowl eligible because they beat Florida the game before Dan Mullen got fired, and they beat Auburn in the midst of just a complete meltdown by Auburn that almost led to Brian Harsin, getting run out of town, although I think Brian Kelly's about to get run out of town himself down there in Baton Rouge. But they beat Florida, they beat Auburn. They play those games at a different time of year. I don't know that they're winning those games. Now, it's a credit to South Carolina for winning them, but were they that improved, or did they just catch the right teams at the right time? The other thing was, there was a lot of excitement around the arrival of Spencer Rattler. And listen, I don't root against individual players. I'm not saying he's terrible, but we all saw him at Oklahoma last year. There was a reason he was not only benched once. Remember, he was actually benched twice. Actually got an opportunity late in the season when Caleb Williams was struggling. We're going to talk about Caleb Williams in a minute. And Spencer Rattler just didn't get the job done, and he looked very much the same on Saturday in South Carolina's win over over Georgia State. 23 of 37 passing, 6 yards per completion, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. That was kind of what he did with Oklahoma last year. Didn't have a lot of big plays, didn't have a lot of precision. I know he completed a lot of passes, but it wasn't for very much yardage. And there was a reason that Spencer Rattler got benched. Oklahoma's offense was not very good with him on the field. South Carolina's offense struggled with him last week. More concerning than Spencer Rattler, though, let's not put this all on Spencer Rattler. His run game did not help him, and this is where it gets interesting for the Arkansas game on Saturday. How about this? against the Georgia State team, which was fine defensively last year, but they weren't, elite even for the group of 5 level. South Carolina rushed for 2.5 yards per carry in that game, 79 yards rushing on 32 carries. Not very good against Georgia State. And so ultimately, what I would say about South Carolina, that is what concerns me about the Gamecocks coming into this game. I think most people like South Carolina to cover the 8.5. I actually feel the exact opposite, and it's pretty much straightforward. It's because, as we know, in college football, in sports in general, styles make fights. And I do think the style is advantageous for Arkansas. At home, great home crowd, second home game of the year. South Carolina struggled at home themselves last week against Georgia State. Now, was there a potential look ahead? Of course, it's possible. But this was a team that very much struggled offensively last year, and they very much struggled specifically to run the ball last year as well. Well, now you have an improvement at quarterback. To Spencer Rattler's credit, he's better than what they had last year, but you still can't run the ball. The quarterback doesn't look elite. And so I do worry that the one place that Arkansas can really expose teams is in the toughness, physicality in the trenches. I think that's exactly what they do. Again, I don't tell you how to bet. Betfred Sportsbook has it at 8. I got Arkansas winning this game and covering the spread at home in Fayetteville.